We are back for another week of HBO's Watchmen, which I'm pretty sure is the weirdest show currently on TV. Before we get into episode 2, this is your spoiler warning. If you have not watched it, go away, get out of here.
Episode 2 opens with a flashback to World War I. This is not World War II, it's World War I, despite the fact that it's Germany and, war times. We get a look at some typists typing up some propaganda that is for black soldiers in the American Army during World War I. And those are all, those flyers that they're typing and the flyers that they're dropping are real. And that's what ends up, we learn that Will's father was in the army.
Right. So and this ties back to what are his loyalties? Why is he doing this? We still don't really know. I feel like this episode was it's set up even more mysteries.
Yes.
I am ready to get some answers.
Yes. So we learned that the note that he was carrying as a baby, the watch over this boy, that was written on the back of one of these propaganda flyers about the racial inequality in America, coming from the German army.
So clearly that influenced him.
Yes. We also, in this sequence, we get our episode title, Martial Feats of Comanche Horsemanship.
I keep wanting to say Martian
Feats.
Because of Dr. Manhattan.
Yes.
Yeah, let's talk about the episode title because it's this painting that we see later during Judd's funeral.
Yeah, his wake.
Yeah. The painting is in his house, and there's a lot of subtext to read into with the painting because it's about Native American warriors doing this trick where they would hide behind the horses, and then Angela finds his KKK uniform, so clearly Judd was hiding things about himself, and so there's
he was using a uniform as a shield, and so the warriors in this painting are using horses as body shields, which less on the nose as last week's episode title was extremely on the nose and very obvious. This one, not so much.
You got any sugar?
No.
Some bakery.
Our first scene in the modern day is Angela immediately after Judd's murder, and she's taking the old man not to the police station. She doesn't call it in. She takes him to the bakery.
Right, and she's taking justice into her own hands, just like she did last week when she busted into that trailer park and kidnapped that guy. So it seems like maybe she doesn't trust her fellow officers, or maybe she doesn't trust some people there, and she doesn't
even call Looking Glass or anybody who might potentially be on the level, the other detectives. Nobody. She doesn't call anybody. She takes him in to the bakery and starts questioning him, and he flat out admits that he is the one who murdered the chief of police, and she does not believe him.
He's really proud of himself.
Who are you?
I'm the one who strung your chief of police up.
He jokes about the fact that he might be Dr. Manhattan, and he's just looking like a human, which they have this really interesting conversation about what Dr. Manhattan's powers could be, and if he can make himself look like a human.
I went and revisited a bunch of stuff, what are Dr. Manhattan's powers?
Right.
And it's kind of just anything, just whatever he wants. So it made me ask, why can't he make himself, he can grow to huge sizes and make duplicates of himself. Who says he can't make himself look like a human?
Yeah, I don't think there's not anything in actual Watchmen canon that says that he can't do that. But this scene and then another scene later on, we get...
She's talking to Cal.
Right. We get this, very no, he can't do that. For sure he can't do that. And
so maybe something happened in between the comics and now that makes us think that. We know that Dr. Manhattan was on Mars at the end of the books. We know that he's on Mars currently. We don't know that he's been on Mars the entire time, right? There's many years of history.
Right, and obviously he can duplicate himself, so he could be on Mars and also on Earth at the same time. There's nothing saying that he can't do that.
I can't wait for more of that.
We also learn that he's taking pills. We don't know what they are, but there's a very pointed shot that's look at these pills. Remember these pills. So we don't know what they are.
Between that and the very end of this episode, which we'll get to, the mysteries around Will are just I have no idea what's going on with him.
No, me neither.
So the next scene is the newspaper stand, which I felt was very appropriate within the world of Watchmen. We're always checking in with newspaper guys for some reason, even in 2019. I guess it makes more sense in their world since they have this mistrust of technology that we don't have, even though we probably should. But yeah, we check in with the newspaper guys, and there's some juicy stuff in there. There's the headline about the Squidfall conspiracies. There's the thing about Senator Keene, who we find out later in the episode is the son of the guy who enacted like is it the Keene Act?
Mm-hmm. The Keene Act of the 70s.
The original, legislation that outlawed masked vigilantism or whatever. And then there's also this new character who gets introduced, this young girl who is she a character? Like, I have no idea what's going on with her, but it seemed like her introduction was pointed in a way that made me think she's gonna come back later. But then why did they introduce her here?
She gets out of this like really fancy Escalade and buys every newspaper that is available.
It seems important.
Yeah, like she buys everything, and the man at the stand obviously knows her. He knows who she's with and everything. Like, oh, do you really read all of those? And she says, of course, don't you? And he responds like, oh, I just don't believe them.
Yeah, it's one of those things in this episode that I feel like I would have forgotten about it if I hadn't watched this episode like 3 times. But we'll definitely see more of her later, I think.
The next scene is Angela actually going to the scene of the crime. They're dealing with Judd's body. All of the detectives are there. We have a really nice conversation between Looking Glass and Angela, where we get it's insinuated that like Looking Glass understands that Angela may not be totally honest. Like, he's a little suspicious of her, which makes sense because he is the guy who is really good at reading people. We also get a little comment from him.
My kids were there.
Your kids.
And we find out later in the episode, just through some dialogue, like it's still not even obvious, you could miss it, but her kids that she's raising with Cal are actually her dead partner's kids, because her partner, when she was on the force before, got killed along with his wife during the White Night. And when Judd, during the flashback, when she wakes up the next morning, Judd is there and he says the names of the kids, and it's Topher and whatever the other 2 are. And Looking Glass apparently has an opinion about this.
And it's kind of a shitty opinion. Sorry, man.
I know you love Looking Glass.
I love him. I don't want him to be a bad person. But we also see that the reporters are wearing backpacks with wings, which are directly descendant from the backpack, the winged backpack that one of the original Minutemen wore. His name was Mothman, appropriately, Byron Lewis. Again, it's one of those weird situations where we can't really tell how the technology made it down to like paparazzi. It's
like the Owl's ship from episode 1. It's like, why is Night Owl's ship in the hands of the Tulsa police force?
Right. Why is Byron's like wing backpack in the hands of like random reporters? And Red Scare is not impressed that they were there, so he beats the crap out of one.
I want to know more about him. So the next scene, we finally get a look back at the White Night, which is the pivotal event for the series when the 7th Cavalry attacked the police force, and it's why the police wear masks, all this stuff. And it's pretty much exactly what we expected, which is a bunch of white supremacists wearing Rorschach masks, infiltrating police officers' homes and murdering or attempting to murder them. Now, she gets away.
It's really interesting how this scene happens, because the attacker breaks in like minutes before midnight. Of course, you get the shot of the clock and it's the countdown. Minutes before midnight, the attackers break into their home. She gets one of them. Like, she knifes the guy in the neck.
Good.
Like, really good. And then we get this really interesting scene where she turns and looks, and we see someone off screen in a Rorschach mask who shoots her in the stomach, and she's blown backwards. And then he has her dead to rights, like literally has the shotgun like up against her forehead.
After the first time I watched it, I was trying to remember how that scene ended, and I couldn't. And then when I rewatched the episode, I realized it's because the scene doesn't end. It just, he's got the gun pointed at her, and then she closes her eyes. She wakes up in the hospital. So many questions, like who was the second shooter? How did she get away? Et cetera, et cetera. She wakes up, Judd is there, and he just says, "You got your guy."
Right, he doesn't mention that there was a second person in the home at all, and Angela doesn't question it.
Where the hell was Cal? Where was her husband? So weird.
It's super weird. So who actually shot Angela? Who was the one who shot her?
It makes me super suspicious of Judd.
Right, I don't know. I don't want to not like...
I'm mad at the show for making me like him so much in the first episode.
Right, yeah, me too.
That's
and then immediately, we learn in this episode later on that he was apparently, I don't know if he was a KKK member or if his father was.
Right, it wasn't necessarily his robe, I guess.
He sure kept it in like a shrine.
Yeah, it wasn't like tucked away somewhere. Like, it was, it was very well lit.
Right, so who actually shot Angela is maybe my biggest question of this episode.
I am sure we will get more information about what happened that night at some point.
After we leave the flashback, we're back in modern times with a raid on Nixonville, which was the trailer park that Angela did a one-woman raid of earlier in the first episode, but this is a full-scale like police raid of Nixonville because they assume that they had something to do with Judd.
Why is it called Nixonville?
They have a giant Nixon statue.
It's a good joke. I'm just, it's just one of those details that makes this show weird and unique.
But we get more of an insinuation that LG has an idea that like something is wrong with Angela or something, that she's keeping some sort of secret. I feel like there's probably something gonna boil over between the two of them soon. But then after that, we get Angela kind of pulling a fast one on Will and taking a coffee cup that he drank from to test his DNA at the cultural center, which we get to see really cool like museum holograms and everything. It's about...
Did you know that this show is set in the future?
It's not the future though, it's 2019 and the alternate 2019.
You know what I meant, it's sci-fi.
But so we get a cool museum scene where we learn that the way that you can kind of get your like family tree built, I guess, is by going to this cultural center and submitting DNA to this little like box run by Henry Louis Gates Jr., who is a real person. He was also the host of a PBS show called Know Your Roots, where he did kind of the same thing, only in the real world. And so Angela takes that and submits Will's DNA.
And then she'll find out later that he was indeed descended from someone, or was literally, because he's so old.
He's so old.
Was literally at the Tulsa Race riots. And then also finds out that she's his granddaughter. Which
layers
is,
upon layers. Wild.
That's a wrinkle. So the next scene, she goes back to her house, and there's like some guy on her porch, which I was already confused about. And then when we were talking, I realized the thing about her kids being her old partner's kids, and now I'm like triple confused.
I assume
Who is this guy?
This old man has to be like her partner's dad, or her late partner's dad, or some sort of
right,
like
the kid's grandpa maybe, but then why would there be such an issue with the visitation?
And like neither Cal nor Angela like wants this guy around, and then he's also kind of a dirtbag. He takes a check rather than seeing his grandchildren maybe.
I liked this episode, but at a certain point I felt that they were withholding information from me just for the sake of withholding that information. Like, why can't I know who this guy is?
I don't know.
What purpose does it, like, this is not a good mystery. I'm just confused. So then when she gets into her house, we get another shot of a clock, which this one shows 11:30, which doesn't seem to relate to the countdown to midnight.
It's a little weird because usually when you deal with clocks in Watchmen, they're always on the 11:50, 11:55 area.
I feel like maybe we might just be getting too deep, like looking at every single clock in every shot.
Slowly going crazy.
Hey, what's going on in here?
She's a pirate. I'm an owl. We caught a ghost on our ship.
A ghost, huh?
Obviously, this relates to a bunch of different characters because there's like the owl ship from the last episode. Angela has the night vision goggles that are like night owls, night vision goggles. The ghost reminds me of the KKK uniform in Judd's closet. But then also the pirate is like I wouldn't have known it unless you told me, but the name of the character flying the owl ship in the first episode is Pirate Jenny.
Yeah, she's another one of the detectives in the Tulsa PD, and she wears like a lace mask. Hasn't been in the show very much since that episode, but I know her name from IMDb. Her name is Pirate Jenny, so there's a lot of like pirate iconography kind of at play here. And then also the Black Freighter is another thing that you can't ever ignore when you're talking about Watchmen, which is a pirate story. So
how do the kids know about any of this, or is it just like another one of those things that's like
it's interesting because I will also talk about the kids knowing things that they shouldn't know in the next scene, because Topher has something kind of going on that blew our collective mind when we realized it when we were going through everything.
So his magnetic toys, they're
Magna-Hattan blocks.
Magna-Hattan. So
which is
like
a very cute name.
Magnet in Manhattan.
Right.
I guess. So like did Dr. Manhattan like invent this toy somehow, or is like
I feel like it's
to
just
him in some way?
cutesy. I think it's just cutesy like branding, because it's a little blue box and it's got like the black text on it, and
it is cute.
Yeah.
So the structure that Topher is building with this toy when Angela is talking to him about Judd dying is the same structure that Dr. Manhattan in the first episode, in that brief clip of him during a transition to Angela in the classroom, it's crumpling into dust when she's talking about the cell walls of the eggs protein or so. It's the same structure.
But it's also the same structure as the castle that Ozymandias is living in. Like, what? It's all the same castle. If you look at it in the first episode,
happening?
it's the same, like, it's got the same, like, columns, and it's the same thing.
The structure that you can really recognize is, like, the tower with the 4 turrets that on each corner. It's the same structure. So Topher is building it, Dr. Manhattan is building it and destroying it on Mars, and it's where Adrian Veidt lives.
So how, I can understand it to some degree, because like there is a relationship between Ozymandias and Dr. Manhattan, at least obliquely, whatever.
Yep.
They have a connection. How does Topher play into
is-
this? Is Topher Dr. Manhattan?
I saw that theory on Reddit, and we wrote about it a little bit on the site. But yeah, is Topher Dr. Manhattan? I don't think so, but like I don't have a better explanation for what is going on.
Here's what I thought, and maybe this is totally wrong, but the idea that potentially the technology bans for like cell phones and whatnot, they were looking at the wrong tech, and maybe it's really simple tech like magnets and like really base elemental stuff.
Like that stuff is having an influence
Right.
over Topher
Yes, exactly.
somehow.
Like that is the stuff that Dr. Manhattan is able to influence because it's elemental, right? Like it's kind of base scientific compounds.
I really hope we get some answers for something, and it's not just like mystery after mystery with no payoff. Whew. Okay, so then we finally get a look at American Hero Story, which was the show within the show that was teased in the last episode. During the transition when the show is started and they're kind of like going over this very long, weird, like trigger warning thing. One of those shots, besides Looking Glass, is like eating his TV dinner.
He's so cute and very Rorschach.
One of those shots is the 7th Cavalry guys making an explosive vest. It seems like a suicide bomber thing, so it seems like is about to go down.
That is a Chekhov's gun for sure.
Chekhov's vest. Yeah, but I wanted to hear what you had to say about the American Hero Story stuff.
It's really interesting, and actually, if you look at the Pedopedia, you learn a little bit more about American Hero
That's
Story.
like the website that HBO is. So they're updating it every week, right?
Every week on Mondays, not Sunday nights. So on Monday morning, after each episode airs, you get new Pedopedia information. And this week had more context for American Hero Story because the episode within the episode we see here is all about Rolf Muller, who the show assumes is Hooded Justice. There's some contentious about that. We talked last week about how no one knows who Hooded Justice actually is.
And I think it's Will.
I think it might be Will, but in the show within the show's mind, it's this guy named Rolf Muller, and it is the most over the top, like Zack Snyder, like
It's like bam pow, like superheroes stuff.
and it's all slow-mo and just hyper violent and very brutal, and it's
the cash register.
yeah, like crushing this dude's skull in like the 1930s is when this is all taking place. But it's very obviously this like hyper violent version of history that never actually happened. And then in the Pedopedia documents, you learn that this is actually the 2nd season of American Hero Story, and the 1st season was all about Rorschach.
I would like to see that.
The government, or at least the arm of the government that's focusing on vigilantism, is like very concerned because apparently the Rorschach season had some bad influences on people, and now they're very worried that like the Minutemen season is going to have.
What's do we know the timing there? Did the show influence the 7th Cavalry people?
I don't think so.
It seems like 7th Cavalry stuff has been going on longer.
Yeah, I think the 7th Cavalry stuff started more with the release of the journals and then kind of was bolstered by the fact that it became a pop phenomenon after that. But
yeah, it's interesting, like knowing that masked superheroes and vigilantes and stuff are illegal in this world, to see that they have still, despite that, become this pop culture sensation in that world. We should also talk about the voiceover from the show kind of blending over into shots of Angela when Hooded Justice is talking about if he knew who he really was, he wouldn't have to wear a mask, like all of this stuff. Like it seemed very pointed. It seemed like we're getting some insight, some meta insight into Angela's character.
Yeah, it's not very subtle. Like they linger on her face for so long with his voiceover going on about, like how angry he is and how he doesn't know he doesn't know his own identity. It's wild. And
this is before she learns and then we learn that she's Will's granddaughter. So if Will is Hooded Justice, which seems to be super possible within this narrative that the show is building, then she would be related to him, and this voiceover would make a lot more sense in retrospect after we find that out.
Right.
So we talked about the wake a little bit already because it ties into so many things, but this is when Angela discovers Judd's big secret using the night vision or like the X-ray specs or whatever that reminded us both of Night Owl in a really good way.
Yeah, it's really cute. And then we also meet Joe Keane, who is the senator who is running for president, who we heard mention of back at the newsstand. We learn through this very awkward interaction that he definitely knows Angela is still a cop. For sure.
He for sure knows.
Yeah, so obviously he and Judd were friends because Judd's wife used to work for Keane. So there's probably some information spillage happening there, but
there's connections, and then learning what we learned about Judd this episode makes me extremely suspicious of Senator Keane as well.
Yeah, I don't trust this guy at all.
And then we're back to the character who we know is Ozymandias.
It's definitely Ozymandias.
But the show has still not actually confirmed who this guy is. But anyway, we get a look at his play that he mentioned in the last episode, and it's f***ing insane. He has his servants act out this play, and then one of them literally gets burned alive. It's literally the Dr. Manhattan origin story.
It's 100% just the origin story of the character, and we know just immediately that it's low budget and it's a 2-man play, and everyone who isn't acting is wearing a bag over their head. It's really weird.
Well, that's for the reveal that they're all the same people, because...
Called it, clones!
Yeah, you did. Congrats, good
Thank
job.
Thank you.
So all of his servants are clones. Who is this play for? Who is he writing? Is it just for his own...
He's obsessed with
Is
Dr. Manhattan.
watching him from Mars? Does he suspect
Maybe.
that? I don't... what is the point of all this?
It's the last line of the play.
Nothing ever ends.
Is a line from the Watchmen comic, which is actually the last thing that Dr. Manhattan said to Veidt when Veidt was asking whether or not he had actually made the right choice. And he's I did it, right? I'm helping all of these people. I did the right thing. Or I put a stop to it or something.
Right.
And Dr. Manhattan responds nothing ends, Adrian, nothing ever ends.
He says it when he's looking at the pocket watch, which has been burned in this horrible fire, and then one of his servants, the new Mr. Phillips or whatever, will repair it, and then presumably they'll do the play again. So it's just a loop that he plays out over and over.
I mean, he must, because I get the feeling that we're supposed to take away from the scene the fact that Ozymandias honestly does not know if he did the right thing with his plan in the squids. Dr. Manhattan shook his confidence so hard at that moment that he is now just obsessed with trying to figure out how to get to that place, how to get to that awareness or how to get to that understanding that Dr. Manhattan has of things. Because that's the one thing Ozymandias doesn't have right now, is the certainty.
He's very smart, but he's not actually omniscient.
Right, he's not omnipotent.
I like that read a lot.
And he's just trying to the best of his ability in the weirdest, most eccentric way possible to get some sort of confirmation that he actually he made the right move, because he doesn't know.
There's so many other mysteries with him too, like the tomato tree.
Yeah, tomatoes do not grow on trees. What? I had to look this up. I was like, do you not know? Is there just some super tomato that's out there growing in an orchard? No.
His horse's name
is
something?
Bucephalus, which is the name of Alexander the Great's horse, which is, if this is not Ozymandias, I will lose my mind, because that is the most Ozymandias thing you could possibly do.
That's the exact type of self-aggrandizing bullshit we expect from him, so that makes sense. And then there's all the stuff with his castle being the same castle and all the stuff that we talked about before. So when is the show gonna just confirm who that is? That's what I want. The mystery with him is it's a mystery within a mystery within a mystery, and it's being built so slowly. It feels like the Saint of Killers stuff in Preacher, where it's you get one scene with him a week, and it just kind of gets weirder and weirder.
At this point too, I can't imagine if they were. I've seen some people talking on Reddit about whether or not maybe this guy isn't Ozymandias, he's a clone of Ozymandias, and now we have concrete evidence in this episode to suggest that cloning is totally possible and very real.
Right, but if he was a clone of Veidt, why would he remember things that Dr. Manhattan
Maybe
said to
he's
the original
remembering
Veidt?
it wrong, and that's why he's doing a play. Maybe he doesn't have correct memories. I don't know. I'm just saying that seems like a theory that could potentially if they're trying to back out of having this actually be Ozymandias, that would be a good way to do it.
So then we get to the final scene, and we're back at the bakery with Angela and Will, and he reaches his bare hand into a boiling pot of water and plucks out an egg, and then like very disgustingly just like throws the shell and just like sucks that egg down.
Ugh.
And she's like distracted on the phone, or I feel like she would have been way more alarmed about this clearly alien behavior. That's my new theory, is that he's an alien, because that was f***ing weird.
That's also where we learned that Will is Angela's grandfather. It's where he has this very weird conversation about how he has friends in high places, which then becomes literal the second she's like, okay, enough of this, I'm taking you in.
Yeah, our writer Kevin Wong pointed this out in the theories gallery that we put up today, but everything he says is literal.
Extremely literal.
Yeah.
Yeah, like skeletons in the closet.
Literally in the closet, and then friends in high places, literally like a UFO or something, maybe an owl ship.
Does he get abducted by aliens?
Do you think it was an owl ship
I don't.
with a magnet on it? Because that can hover, and it's...
I mean, maybe there's a giant electromagnet
so
that picks up a
confused.
car.
I'm so confused.
It was
I just want to know some
wild.
answers. Do you think we'll get some answers next week?
I really hope so. It feels like we've been doing this for a long time, but really only 2 episodes. It's only been 2 hours.
It's
2
oh
hours
God.
of TV, and
It
we're
feels
like
it's been a
baffled.
lifetime. Until then, please, subscribe to GameSpot. We're gonna do more of these breakdowns. There's tons of breakdowns about all kinds of other stuff too. Hit us up on Twitter. Talk to us in the comments. Tell us everything we missed. Tell us what you think of the season so far. And that's it.
Bye.